Well, is it an institution that is often misunderstood, or it's just that people don't know? And if I'm talking about people, the public, the politicians, or the political parties on one side and in the media do not necessarily know the role that it plays as far as in making sure expenditure of the state is in line with what the standard should be. We're talking about the Auditor General's Department, and I guess we all need some level of education, having gone through the last couple of weeks of some controversial comments following published audited reports from the Auditor General's Department that have been cited, and in many respects, well, we've had captions highlighted across the public discourse and the media just for our own understanding, and to help us do a lot more of that very education, but also highlight some of those controversial issues we're likely to raise in the next 45 minutes or 50 minutes. We have Yahweh Sifa. He is a Deputy Auditor General in charge of special duties and parliamentary liaison, and basically means that beyond his activity or role for special duties, he also is the link between Parliament and the Auditor General's Department. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Roland.
We're very much grateful. Yeah. The Auditor General's Department, and we call it a service in general, the audit service. What basically are your roles as stipulated by the Constitution?
Yeah, thank you, Roland. The Auditor General's office is a public office which has been established under the Constitution. And specifically, our role is to audit the public accounts of Ghana and the accounts of all public institutions. Indeed, we are talking about any institution that subsists on the consolidated fund. And we are to submit our reports to Parliament we did by 6 months after the end of the year to which the report relates. So basically, we are to audit, to carry out this legislative audit to give Parliament credible, robust evidence as to how government uses the taxpayers' money. So basically, this is our role.
Yeah. And over time, you've been known to make sure that as far as the expenditures are concerned, you do the investigations and find out why and how perhaps payments were made or monies were used based on the allocations of those very funds in many respects. What sort of institutions do you audit?
Roland, let me maybe correct. The word investigation is a bit too strong for me, in the sense that in routine audits, we are carrying out audits. We are looking at systems, we are looking at controls, we are looking at what has been put together in the public financial management system to ensure that activities are, financial transactions are carried out within bounds. So I wouldn't say that it's an investigation. It's a normal routine audit, which we do. It's an annualized sort of audit. But so that is, but then you wanted to know
the institutions that you audit.
Yeah, we are spread throughout the country. And in fact, we are auditing all public institutions. Every institution that is funded from the consolidated fund, we audit it. So we can talk about the courts, the universities, the ministries, the departments and agencies. So here we are talking about 217 administrative districts within the country. Then we are talking about all the universities in the country. We are talking about the courts. We are talking about the ministries, departments and agencies, the central government department. So we are auditing almost everything. In fact, any institution,
anything that concerns
that subsists on the consolidated fund.
All right. So that should also include the foreign missions, etc.
Precisely so. Okay. Yes, that they come under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Then I suppose you have various heads for each of those centralized units.
Yeah, precisely. So you see, the audit service is structured in such a way that we have 5 deputy auditors generals. And in fact, one is for the central government audit departments. They are looking at the ministries, departments, and agencies in the central government. Then we have the educational institutions and district assemblies department. They are also looking at all the metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies throughout the country, and we call them the senior high schools. But normally we capture them in a report we call the pre-university educational institutions. Then we have but the central government, then we have the other department is the commercial audits department. They look at the public boards, corporations, and other statutory institutions. Then we have they also come up with a report on the higher educational institutions, like the tertiary institutions. So basically, these are the three operational departments that enable us to, carry out our mandate as required by the Constitution.
And in doing this, do you try to educate the public as to how they can better understand and appreciate the activities that you undertake, as far as the objectives for which you are set up?
We have tried, in the past to reach out to the public. In fact, we have institutionalized what we call the annual accountability lectures, where we try to have a dialogue with civil society, the public at large, and then we are doing it on annual basis. Aside of that, we have come up with brochures and then flyers, that actually show what the audit service exists to do. Our work, and for instance, we have introduced performance audit, and you go into an institution and they think that auditing is just between the auditor and the accountant. So as soon as you get there, they tell you, oh, go and see the accountant. But we tell them that we are going beyond the accounting numbers to look at how effectively, efficiently, and economically they are using public resources. So we try to do a lot of education. We have a lot of interactions. And in fact, before we even carry out any audit, we have what we call the entrance conference. And at the entrance conference, we try to set out what we are going to look at, what objectives we want to achieve, and even the timelines and the sort of resources that we may need as we carry out the audit. So we try to, in modern auditing, there shouldn't be any surprises. No. So we try to be very open, very transparent in the way we go about our work.
That reminds me, even for the private companies that we work for, and the external auditors come, they go about their business as if nothing is amiss. You only get to know something is amiss at the end of the day when they present their report, and you're supposed to, they raise queries and you're supposed to answer. If it's a performance audit, is it the same thing as substituted as value for money audit?
Yes, that is a synonym. One of the other.
So now that's a major objective. And as a department, what have been your observation about how efficiently funds have been used, let's say over the last decade and a half? And if we're talking about funds either from the consolidated fund or they're from donor supports, etc.
It might be very difficult to make a definite statement as to, because you see, we pick institutions, we pick projects and audit them, and so what goes for one project might not necessarily go for another project. But then what I can say is that there is that understanding, and people are now beginning to understand and appreciate the work, the work that we do as auditors. And I will also want to say that the involvement of Parliament has also sort of exposed a lot of people to even what the Auditor General does and the sort of reports, and even especially during the public sittings. So for us, we think that there are significant changes, there are improvements. We can see improvements, but I think that we still have a lot more to do. I can say for sure that it's not as bad as we think it is.
Well, as the teachers put it in the terminal reports, more room for improvement.
Precisely so.
Would you say, for all the things that we advocate about improvement, in the way that the auditor, the audit service would undertake its work, or the department would undertake its work. Do you think that the changes are coming fast enough, expeditious enough, are revolutionary enough?
You mean you're talking about the audits from the point of the Auditor General Audit Service?
The audit service.
Yeah.
The phrase that we keep using, room for improvement. The way we want it, the way how efficiently you would want to work. Do you think it's coming fast enough?
We are looking at our internal processes and seeing how we can improve on whatever we are doing. Currently, we have introduced what we call the Regularity Audit Manual, which the financial auditors use. And it's supposed to inform or to provide the basis for all audits that we carry out, so that there will be standardization of the work processes and the practices. And almost everybody in the service has been trained on the use of that. We are improving our quality assurance processes to ensure that at least we can be able to, speak to the quality of the report that we are generating. But then we would have wished, as a matter of fact, that there has always been this perception that it is the Auditor General who should implement his recommendations. But that is just not the case.
Okay.
The Audit Service Act Section 30 has actually provided for the setting up of what we call the Audit Report Implementation Committees. For ministries, departments, and agencies in the central government, we have what we call the ministerial committees, which are supposed to be chaired by the ministers. You go to the district assemblies, and we have special committees of the assembly, which is also supposed to ensure that management implements the recommendations. Can I throw this thing somewhere? And then we have for corporate entities, those operating under their own enactments. They also have to set up governing councils or boards to also oversee the implementation of the recommendations in the Auditor General's report. So essentially, these institutions are not functional. They have not been set up, and and even where they have been set up, they are not very functional. So recently, the president had cause to write to the ministers, as the sector ministers, as chairmen of the ministerials, to ensure the implementation of the recommendation. They are not to implement the recommendation, but they are to ensure that the chief director, the spending officer, and the management actually implement the recommendation. And we believe that if they were working as they should, I think that a lot of the concerns, a lot of the litany of irregularities that we see, almost similar.
Well, we'll come to some of them. And,
okay.
And I remember, well, I've read through some of the audited reports as far back as 1985. And, and if you read, let's say, 2012 or 2011, you see that the irregularities are almost the same. Okay. Now, the recent one, you have 2013.
Yes, 2013.
Okay. Why is it that we're in 2015 and we have 2013? Of course, we know years back it used to be 3, 4, 5 years deficit as far as that is concerned.
By God's grace, we've been able to actually clear the backlog. So now we don't have any arrears.
Well, we do. 2014 is enough.
Yes. 2014, the Auditor General's reports for 2014, there is a statutory reporting deadline, which is 6 months after the end of the year to which the report relates. So 2014 should be reported on by June of 2015. So as we are speaking, it is not due yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Statutorily.
Statutorily. Okay. So
we do understand that.
It's not.
So by June, and you've always met that deadline? Or if you're late, give and take 2 months, 3 months?
Let's give maybe 2 months. we are doing our best not to relapse into those arrears thing. And
was that the same situation for 2013 too?
No.
You presented,
2013 we
presented on time.
On time. So all the reports are there. And I think 3 weeks ago, I led a team of technical staff. After Parliament, the Speaker has referred the report to the PAC. I led a team of technical staff from the Audit Service to actually present the reports to the PAC members. And the idea is that at that forum, they actually take us to the cleaners. They take on the reports.
You mean PAC, the Public Accounts Committee?
Yeah, the members. They actually look at the reports critically, and then if they think that there are things that we should have done that we didn't do, or they make suggestions for. And in fact, I must say that our interaction with the PAC has really, resulted in a lot of improvements in the things that we do. So that is so we would have wished, as a matter of fact, that the RX were functional. Then a lot of the weaknesses would have been.
We'll talk about the functionalities and who's supposed to be responsible, and if department or responsibility heads were undertaking their work adequately, things could have been prevented or resolved one way or the other. But why do we tend to have all this controversy, perhaps the beginning of the next year or the following ensuing year or the close of the year, about an Auditor General's report that may have been cited the media, etc., by the media, etc.? Do you think we can cure that by engaging the media preemptively?
Yeah, I think that can be cured. You see, the problem is that and this is where we think that the media, in fact, I have personally had to, because of my role as the parliamentary liaison, have to make a presentation to the parliamentary press corps on the Auditor General's processes, so that they actually try to understand where we are coming from. You see, we go to an audit location, and then we issue what we call audit observations. And then we give these observations to management so that they can pass them on to whoever should answer. And then they try to provide responses. We use these observations, and then at the end of the day, the answers are provided, and then we come up with what we call a draft management letter. Now, this draft management letter is discussed at the exit conference. Now responses are given to some of the observations that we found. So the Audit Service Act actually allows or gives a 30-day deadline to the auditee to respond to whatever observations we've made in the management letter. So we give, but unfortunately, this is where sometimes the misunderstanding comes in. Between the 30 days that there is, management is supposed to respond, somebody maybe within the institution sort of hijacks the report or leaks it to the press, and then they start serializing when it has not become formally a public document. So this is where we're thinking that if you see a report which is saying that there is the mandatory 30 days has not expired, you cannot deem that to be a final report which can, be circulated. And this is where a lot of the problem that we have had with leaked reports are coming to. When the reports hit Parliament, now from that point, after we have issued the draft, and then we get the final report, the final management letter, we now go on to sort of pick notes from those management letters to compile the Auditor General's report. Now, the auditor, even at the point of compilation, we still give opportunity to the auditee to respond to the issues that have still not been resolved. So at the end of the day, it is the unresolved issues in the management letters that we put together into the Auditor General's report, and then we send to Parliament. So that is how the system works. Now it goes to Parliament. Parliament, the Public Accounts Department sits on it, that's the public hearing. And then subsequently, sort of the PAC will also submit its report to the plenary for adoption. So when it's adopted, then the recommendations become that of Parliament, which should be implemented by the audit report implementation, which should be seen to be implemented, sorry. It is not the RX who are implementing the recommendation. They are to see to it that management implements the recommendations.
Okay. It's an interesting point you make, because we know Occupy Ghana, they've had cause to raise issues, and I believe some few months ago a whole forum was put together in which your institution became a subject of talk and discussion, and even trying to juxtapose what regulations there are, an authority that mandates you by law to either ensure that certain actions are taken when concerns have been raised in your own report. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I must say that we are still talking to Occupy Ghana so that we see how we can streamline some of these things. I think initially there was a basic misconception of what the Auditor General does. There is a talk about a certificate, but then we are of the view that the management letters we are issuing are tantamount to that certificate that Occupy Ghana is requesting. You
mean we can equate?
We can, precisely. You know, so we are still talking, and then the Attorney General is part of it, so that we see the way forward. At the end of the day, I think what we want to see is to see how we can get the Auditor General's recommendations implemented. And so that is the bottom line. But then the unfortunate impression is being created as if the Auditor General should go, hauling people before court. I have actually spoken about what we do as a service. And if we are going to sort of collate reports from management letters from about 217 these assemblies throughout the country, all the educational institutions throughout the country, the university, there are not that many. But then look at the ministry, department, and agencies, and we do this on annual basis. The Auditor General will not have that liberty, not the liberty, but that time, to, even go chasing people to court. So it is up to management. In fact, in corporate governance, in the private institutions, you get, every institution has a board. The board is having, an audit committee. And it's the audit committee that sees to ensuring that management implements audit recommendations. It is not the Auditor General who goes out there to implement recommendations. So we will make the recommendations. I remember when I was here on Saturday, there was this case about Ms. Azuma, Tina J, and another who have taken some government vehicles. As auditors, we can recommend that management recovers these vehicles.
You recommend that in your report, like you always do?
Yes.
But you feel you have no responsibility, and the law doesn't even mandate you in any way at all to perhaps be in a position to make sure they bring those vehicles, so to speak, in this very hypothetical case.
Yeah. How can we, ensure? It is up to management. A minister is leaving the duty post, and then he takes a car along. Remember the backlash recently about one of our reports on the extension of electricity to 1,200 communities, and Dr. Atani Delali eventually,
who was then the minister,
yes, now returning the car,
following
the
media reports,
exactly, the public outburst
as a result of the media reports.
As a result of the report that we came up with and how the media picked on these issues. We don't think that should be the way we should go. So
we need to have management, and
precisely.
And here, when you say management, is the one who is.
Yeah, we have
the one who is ordering for the reports to be the auditing to be undertaken.
No, our audits are statutorily required, so they don't request as to do the audits.
So if you say management is the government or the ministry or the department?
If it is the department, we are talking about the top hierarchy.
Of that very agency that has been audited.
Precisely.
And that's the body you are referring to as management?
Yes.
Okay, so if it's the ministry, the head of the ministry?
The head of the ministry. So that is why we are talking about this.
So if it's the district assembly, the head of the district assembly?
Precisely. So that is why we have the special committees of the district assemblies. They are to ensure that the head of the assembly. You know, here we are talking about the DC, we are talking about.
So, for example, recently we had also the media also bringing a series of reports on the foreign missions, and that was for which of the reports?
It's also coming in from that same report. We are looking at the ministries, the report on the ministry, department, and agencies of central government.
So, for example, then, let's say, a particular embassy or foreign mission perhaps flouts certain regulations. You have given your report and your recommendations therein. And the management here will refer to, is it the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, yes, precisely. And so currently, upon the President directive, you know, every ministry has set up the Audit Report Implementation Committee. And they are pushing management to implement these recommendations. You see, ordinarily, it might not be all the findings or the recommendations that we make. We might not make, or the observations that we make might not be criminal in nature, if I should use that word. Some are just administrative lapses which needs to be corrected.
Wherein you say administrative lapses are?
We could be talking about maybe internal controls should be built into doing. Let's be specific. Let's look at revenue collection.
The implementation of effective corporate governance practices.
Yeah, precisely. For instance, let's look at revenue collection. You can go into an organization and the person who is collecting the money is the same person who is recording it in the book and then paying the money to bank. So there is no separation of duties between these three key functions. So what happens is that if the guy sort of perpetrates any fraud, it might not be easy to be discovered. It might go on for a very long time before it's
ultimately will be discovered.
Precisely.
So you're talking about the non-delineation of the functions.
Precisely. So
what about even the adoption of perhaps effective corporate governance practices?
Yeah, precisely. So maybe segregation of duties could be coming in here as an effective government practice. So now, if we see maybe the non-segregation of the duty has not occasioned any loss, but then there's that probable effect that if this thing is not checked or if this thing is not corrected. So we make all these recommendations. So it is not everything that we say there which might necessarily have to be taken on by the Attorney General or somebody. But those bordering on criminality, fine. Then management will now push those issues to the Attorney General.
Okay. Now,
prosecution.
Let's talk, for example, the audited report from which we had the controversial issue of the former minister not returning a vehicle to a ministry for which he was heading and had gone to another ministry and had even been shuffled out of the whole ministerial portfolio or the sector. Now it's at home or doing whatever activity he's undertaking, and still is in a possession of a vehicle which is a subject of an audit report. And you may have even from there moved on to another year auditing that same ministry, but the last recommendation has not been dealt with. You just look on because of the regulations you are citing?
No, you know, we don't look on. You see, in the management letter, that is what I was saying on Saturday, that the Auditor General's report that goes to Parliament might not have the finer details, because here we are consolidating, and you know, so more or less we try to be a bit brief. So a lot of the
you just give summaries.
A lot of the finer details might not be there, but they are in the management letter. So specific recommendations would have been made for specific issues or how specific
and
issues
here you are
should
saying
be.
that it is
So
supposed to be implemented by
Yeah, exactly. So what we do
the
is
committees.
that when we go back to do the subsequent year's audit, we follow up to see whether these recommendations have been implemented, and then we report on that as part of the ongoing audit of the current audit that we undertake. Yeah.
Do you think perhaps the way, I know I maybe put you on the line, the way
that's okay.
the Auditor General is appointed and perhaps also not insulated in many respects within the framework of socio-political governance also necessarily doesn't give the impetus for the department to go the extra mile to make sure its recommendations are adequately implemented? Of course, you've raised issues about the management letters, which could be equated to certificates, and so if it concerns of the pressure group Occupy Ghana may not necessarily be adequate, etc.
Well, you see,
I know you're in there, so
yeah,
I don't know how
that's okay.
You
That's
being in office
right.
can
Yes.
comment on something
the,
like this.
The Auditor General is appointed by the President, acting in consultation with the Council of State. And for now, that is what the law provides. And that is exactly what is being done. There may be in other jurisdictions, if we are talking about best practice, there may be you involve Parliament in the selection of the Auditor General. You know,
Like, which jurisdiction are you talking about?
and if you go to Canada,
That's what happens.
that is what happens. Parliament is involved in the selection of the Auditor General.
You mean the legislature?
The legislature.
Of Canada.
So it doesn't, but I don't think that we have a challenge with this arrangement, because the Auditor General, when appointed, is actually insulated from arbitrary removal from office.
So you're saying it's not influenced in any way? That's what you're saying?
Well,
And we all know there is no influence, because going by the report,
Yeah,
it just does its work.
you see,
but the point is, the concerns have been raised about how the recommendations are adequately implemented.
Yeah.
Because if they were implemented, we would be having, for example, expenditures that may have been recorded at somewhere charged, or it could be another agency somewhere, or a district assembly that may have overspent or not adequately spent its funding or resources. And so you will raise queries and subsequently recommendations in your report.
Roland, you see, we have, if RX were working, for instance, just recently, the PAC tabled this report, and in fact, it's in the Hansard for February 13 February, the very latest report that PAC tabled in the plenary. And in the report, they have cataloged savings, that have been tangible savings that have been made as a result of hauling people before the park. And I can bear witness to that, because I was part of all the sittings throughout the country. And the reports were for the 2010 and 2011, 2012 pre-universities educational institutions report. So, and in fact, if you look at, during the contribution, what the chairman of the PAC said was that it appears as if people operate with impunity, with absolute disregard for the audit service, for the Auditor General. Because when you are calling them before the PAC, they rush to go and pay the unearned salaries, the taxes that they have withheld that they haven't paid, and a whole lot of weaknesses identified, and then issues that we have commented on. They rush to go and rectify them before they meet the park. So that comes to reinforce the fact that the RX, if they were working, would have seen to getting a lot of these issues resolved before so that it doesn't even find space in the Auditor General's report to Parliament. But you see, you write, and then they just don't care, you see. So had it not been for the public hearings, I think our reports would have been worse off, had it not been for the intervention.
And you as a department, you're comfortable with that?
No, we are not comfortable.
You seem comfortable with the present arrangement,
no,
because that's what the law stipulates you do, and that's what the law requires you also execute your activities or duties.
No, we are not comfortable with what is going on, because I think sometimes it's demoralizing. I mean, if you should go and an audit and recommendations that you made have not been implemented, and you are even seeing worse cases. No, that is not the best. We would have wished that the government, I'm talking about and I think the president has taken a very bold step, instructing the sector ministries to establish these RX and to enforce, to ensure that recommendations are implemented. And in fact, he's even threatened to withhold the salaries of ministers who do not, and he's given a deadline. We don't think that it should even take the president to, issue such directives, because it is there in the law, and people are just not doing what they should do. You see.
Now, for example, over the years, I remember a report I was reading. Is it a 2011 report in which the ECG was cited? I think for the ECG, they had spent, I believe, 30% of what they had of their revenue on salaries, emoluments, etc. And the Auditor General, the Auditor General's report had indicated that was, I think, a recommendation that needs to be undertaken in respect of that. Now, let's say you take a public agency like the ECG. It's a public operation, okay, and you go and undertake an audit, and you issue your recommendations. The management herein will be the Ministry of Power or Energy. Is that it?
Yeah, they
have oversight responsibility, not management of ECG. Because they should have a committee.
Exactly.
At the ECG level.
Yes.
Unless perhaps
at the ECG level, there should be an audit report implementation committee. But then the ministry should have oversight responsibility. Because at the end of the day, it is the minister who will report on the work of that ARIC at the ECG level. It is not, you see, the chairman of the ARIC are required to report on the status of implementation of the Auditor General's recommendations, citing what has been done, what they intend to do, and then, so it's very, very specific about what the ARICs should do. And that report is supposed to be signed by the sector minister. The report that should go to the Auditor General, to Parliament, and to the President should be signed by, or should be under the signature of the sector minister. Yeah.
But how would you then respond to this, whether it's a volatile situation or it's a very perhaps peculiar situation, if, let's say, the minister in this very scenario also flouts regulations by his own actions or inactions while in office, and then the public corporation that his ministry is having oversight over also flouts regulations, and so we go down the chain, who becomes an embodiment of the management committee that will overlook what and at which level? Do you get my point?
Yes, I do. And this is an issue the former chairman of the PAC used to.
Because the ministry is flouting, headed by the minister is flouting.
He says, who will sanction himself?
Sure.
You see, it's a real situation that could, but
so you're just auditing in vacuum, don't you think so?
No,
sir?
No place. There could be those isolated instances, but the generality is that.
Well, Mr. I don't know whether those incidents are isolated, because we've had a number of these incidents being reported, and if we take any year, not necessarily the latest you have for 2013, you take the previous years, there are a number of violations that you can cite, and they are in a cyclical chain. So how then, if they are not being corrected, would we say perhaps the Auditor General is interested in how its recommendations are implemented?
Roland, maybe if the ARICs were working and the sector ministers are demanding, because
the very sector ministers who are flouting the regulations are also demanding.
No, they should demand and Parliament should also be interested in these status reports. Currently, in 2014, we have given the various regional district auditors, regional auditors, the ministry department agencies, so that we report on the functionality of the ARICs. Because the ARICs are just not working. And in fact, this is an issue. Currently, the ARIC guideline is being, a look is being taken at the ARICs guideline. And it's involved the internal audit agency and the audit service. And these are some of the challenges that we've identified, which going forward, we think we may need to look at. So it's a very real situation, but maybe and more so, maybe if we could distance politics, from the work that we had, from public service. Maybe we could also have, a respite there somehow. You see, I'm saying this because somebody, a minister is leaving or has been reshuffled. He's leaving office. Well, maybe after using a vehicle, an official vehicle for a certain number of years, there are certain conditions that goes with it. The car could be valued and then be paid for. I don't know the very conditions that, but then it's possible that in the public service one could. So if the person has taken the car, we could maybe make a recommendation that either the person returns the car is valued at the time, or maybe at the time that person was taking the car, what was the value? So that maybe the person pays back whatever is due. So if maybe the ministers are seeing themselves as public servants and then also accountable, and I don't think management should be able to put on record some of these things.
Okay. So now I'm sorry I'm putting you into this.
I think I'm comfortable.
Okay.
I'm
not saying you're uncomfortable. all I'm saying is that perhaps you can better speak to the issue if you are out of the service. So it means that one day if you retire, then you could serve as a consultant and then speak to the issues dispassionately as you would want. But it also means that you agree with the critics or even Occupy Ghana that you have the regulations that would ensure whatever recommendations that you have put in your audited books, in your report, are adequately implemented, right? You agree?
Yeah. Yes, I do agree. You see, we do disallow and surcharge, and we do that, religiously.
Okay. So if you audit for a year, and the next year you're coming to audit the same department, and the previous year's recommendations are not being implemented as stipulated by law, what do you do about it? You just go on and do the audit. That, we stated this last year, still appeared this year. Is that how it goes?
Yes, we actually report back on it to management for them to take action on them, you see. So it's not the best. It appears as if, so maybe that is why I said that we are still talking to Occupy Ghana. The Attorney General is part of the discussion. And then we see how we can move the process forward to, ensure the effective implementation of audit recommendations. So the door is not closed, and we see Occupy Ghana is equally interested in managing public resources, just as the Auditor General's mandate requires him to do. So I think we are all saying the same thing, but maybe at this point we haven't reached
There's no convergence.
Understanding.
All right, you've talked about the role of the Public Accounts Committee, etc. In all this also, when you tend to read whatever the regulations are, you get to see that there's a role expected to be played by the Attorney General. True?
Well, the Attorney General
maybe directly doesn't come from you. Yeah. Comes from the Public Accounts Committee. You're the liaison between the
the Attorney General. You see, Parliament, after the PAC has done the public hearing on the report and reported back to the plenary, when the plenary adopts the report, it now becomes a report of the House. So the next line is that the various ministry, department, and agencies must be informed that this is what the House has decided. So we are giving you maybe 6 months within which to implement this and report back. And in fact, I must be honest with you that that is a missing link.
What is the missing link?
There hasn't been that effective communication between Parliament and the audited entities, you know, as to the expectations from them and that kind of thing. You see, you are
well, they appear before the Public Accounts Committee.
Yes.
They know the questions that have been raised
Yeah.
by members of the committee or the committee in itself, based on the recommendations in the report.
Yeah.
So, what sort of link do you want a follow-up effect?
Precisely. You see, the PAC is a fact-finding committee. So they, you know, assemble the facts and then report back to the House. Is that okay? So that is how it works. So they report back to the House. And it is for the House to adopt or reject PAC's report.
And then when they adopt?
Yes, when they adopt, then there should be another. In fact, the Constitution even is talking about the setting up of a special committee of Parliament to even look at issues, the fallouts from the Auditor General's report. But for me, I think that that committee could be set up only after maybe you have actually informed. So formally, the auditees should be informed as to what is expected of them and the time frame within which to do what. And I would say that it will even be good for us if we are doing the follow-up. Because then you know
who is doing the follow-up?
If the audit service is even following up to report back to Parliament.
But you're saying that you're not stipulated by law to be doing the follow-up. Is that not what you're saying?
Oh, we do follow-ups.
You do?
Yes, we do follow-ups. So
and then when you do the follow-ups
and
they are not implemented, what do you do?
And you keep reporting.
Well,
is what I'm
I
saying.
do understand. I know that's your role. That's what you've been regulated by law. But then the role of the auditor, the Attorney General, how does it come into play? Right?
You know, the Attorney General is actually going to. Fortunately, a financial administration court has been set up by the Chief Justice.
You mean supposed to?
Has been set up.
Yeah, no, I mean the role.
And
the role
it's
of
not supposed to.
Attorney General.
No, a financial administration court has been set up by the Chief Justice, which is there. So the role of the Attorney General, you see, these issues that we are talking about, if the ARIC sits on the recommendation, there are certain cases which border on criminality. Supposing somebody has misappropriated money, then that case is now going to be referred to the Attorney General, you know, for study and then eventually for prosecution. So that is how the Attorney General comes in. So he only acts on cases that have been referred to the office, and then they do they'll do that further investigation, and then they eventually.
Okay, let me ask you this last question because we're wrapping up. I want a candid answer from you. Okay. Supposing you were just an independent auditor, maybe you're in private practice, etc., and you were analyzing the reports that come from your department. How would you feel if you did analysis of consistently recommendations over 3 reporting periods about, well, the intense, perhaps unregulated expenditures that are undertaken and non-observation of standardized practices?
Roland, I must say that ideally we are auditing to ensure that systems are improved. We are making recommendations to ensure the improvement of systems so that these irregularities, even where they occur, might not be the norm, you know, but be isolated. You know, it's a human institution, and you. But
we don't have isolated. We have.
Now it's becoming,
what is the norm?
Now it's becoming more like the norm, you know. But we think that we are not comfortable, or if you are asking of my candid opinion, it's like an exercise in futility. You're actually working, and at the end of the day, people are treating your report with impunity, you know. And you don't care, you write what you write, and we don't care what you do. So that is why we're thinking that we need to, you know, actually see how we can get public sector managers to be accountable for their actions, devoid of politics. Let's try to look at issues dispassionately.
Who should do that?
No, I mean, the reason I say this is
because you say you're insulated by law to do what you're doing, and so whoever is supposed to do the management committees, you're telling me heads of the management.
An Auditor General's report comes out, and instantly it becomes NDC and PP.
Well, somebody will say you're playing it safe.
No,
all right.
We don't play it safe. You see, facts are sacred, and there are people. These are seasoned public servants who have worked maybe for all their lives in a place. You can't just attribute or impute any ill motives. So that is why I said earlier on that the Auditor General provides robust evidence to Parliament as to how government is using. So we stand by the facts. We want our reports to be credible, so that whoever is using it, will be standing on a safer ground.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yao Ejesifa is Deputy Auditor General in charge of special duties and also serving as a liaison between Parliament and the Auditor General's Department. And thanks for joining me this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Roland, and for the opportunity.
Yes, please.
To try to explain what
we hope that you can delegate a lot more of your officers to also come in to give us a lot more education, because we can complete whatever it is that we have to do.
Okay.
Just
Roland, you have been with us before.
Yes,
you did a documentary.
Yes, I've done a number of
so
activities.
I think that we shall touch base and then try to see how we can, because the public education is very important. So that at least we are all on the same page as to what should be done and how things are being done. So that the misconceptions will reduce.
Well, we'll see how that goes. We'll see how we can also complement your activities in improving education to the wider public as a whole. Thanks very much, Yao Ejesifa. Now, we have to take a break. When we come back, we'll be doing a lot more discussions on AM Talk as well. So do stay on.
Thank you.